Russia signs military partnership with the Taliban. The exact details of the deal, which signal a deepening of ties between Moscow and Kabul, remain unclear. Russia and Afghanistan signed a military cooperation agreement on Wednesday, just 1 year after the Kremlin removed the Taliban from a list of banned terrorist groups. They removed the Taliban from a list of banned terrorist groups? What? Why? Well, I mean, this is clearly why, so they could lay the groundwork for this, but that seems so wild. I mean, come on. They pretend to be the ones that are like trying to uphold Western values and all that stuff, and being anti-gay and super Catholic and all that stuff, right? And at the same time, they're going to support the same group that's like would have them like killed probably if they had the choice, or like actively have engaged in so many terrorist attacks over the years, like. And the way that they came in and just like slaughtered the Afghan army and all that stuff, and then have been, engaged in retribution against those who helped the Americans when they were there in Afghanistan before the pullout, like crazy. The new agreement underscores the deepening ties between the Kremlin and the Taliban, and while the exact details remain murky, Afghan Defense Minister Mohammad Yaqub said the agreement marked an expansion of the bilateral relations between the two countries. Interaction with Russia is important for us, Yaqub said following a meeting with Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu at the International Security Forum in Moscow. Afghanistan and Russia have long-standing and historic relations, and we want to move forward in this direction. Sort of, they have a historical, like, yeah, I know the Soviets came into Afghanistan, in like what, the 80s, the 70s, 60s, or somewhere in that ballpark, right? I wonder if this has to do with Russia struggling in the Ukraine war recently. I wonder if this is them trying to just gather as many allies as they possibly can, regardless of who those allies are, right? Maybe because I know Russia has been struggling to get enough like internal domestic recruitment for the war. I know they've been losing troops, say they've been losing 30 to 40,000 troops per month, that they're only recruiting something like 20 to 25,000 troops per month, right? And so that delta is eventually going to be a bit of a problem. At some point, there's going to be a bottleneck in their war effort. So to make up for that, I know they've been engaging a lot more in foreign recruiting. They've been trying to get Africans and people from like Kazakhstan, and now it seems like Afghanistan. I wonder if maybe this is just sort of roundabout recruitment effort. I wonder if maybe also it is like some sort of way for them to be like, hey, I'm sure Afghanistan isn't struggling for oil, but maybe under the Taliban leadership, their oil production coordination just isn't there, because I know the Taliban government in Afghanistan is pretty all over the place, pretty like not inexperienced and to some degree inept. And so I wonder if this is maybe like a way for Russia to be like, hey, we'll give you some oil, if you give us some troops and you give us some drone production and some whatever else. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979 and spent the decade fighting a bloody war against the Mujahideen, Islamic guerrilla fighters resisting the occupation, many of whom would later found the Taliban. Yes, when he says there's historic ties, or when he says Afghanistan and Russia have a long-standing and historic relations, yeah, but they aren't positive relations, right? Like you understand who runs Afghanistan right now, right? It's the Taliban. It's the same people that you fought against. Yeah, those are relations, certainly. Yeah, you getting into a fight with them is definitely a type of relation. It's not a good one, though. In the years after Soviet troops withdrew, relations between Moscow and Kabul remained tense. However, following the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan, Russia was accused of supplying arms to the Taliban as the group moved to consolidate its control over the country. That wouldn't surprise me if they did that just to sort of help undermine U.S. efforts, like U.S. control over the region in general, right? But it seems like it would maybe be like, I can't imagine it would make that much of a difference, right? If the U.S. was already pulling out, right? The Taliban took over Afghanistan in 6 days or something crazy like that, right? It was very, very clear as soon as we pulled out. We were the only thing propping up the U.S. military and the U.S. Foreign policy and whatever. It was the only thing propping up the Afghan army, the Afghan government. It was the only thing propping that up. And so I have a hard time imagining that like any Russian support for that was really like super necessary. Like I have a feeling they probably still would have steamrolled over the Afghan defense forces like very, very quickly after the pullout of the U.S. Military. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, in the sense that there is sort of like a pseudo second Cold War going on right now between the US and Russia. You know, they have the sort of proxy-ish war, proxy on the part of the US, you know, on Ukraine's side, and a literal direct war on the case of Russia in the Ukraine front. But you know, it wouldn't surprise me if this was the case. On Wednesday, Shoigu called for Western countries to unfreeze sanctions on the Taliban and fully acknowledge their full responsibility for their 20-year presence in Afghanistan. In April 2025, it's just so funny that like he's calling for other Western countries, like they pretend like they're the bastion of true Western morals and all that stuff. At the same time that they're going to go around and like very cynically, very opportunistically support the Taliban and like make deals with Afghanistan right now. Like, no. In April 2025, Russia removed the Taliban from. In April 2025, blah 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 blah. In April 2025, Russia removed the Taliban from its list of banned terrorist groups, a designation that had been in place since 2003. Then, in July of the same year, it became the first and only country to formally recognize the Taliban as the government of Afghanistan. I don't really know if that means that much because they definitely are the government of Afghanistan right now, right? Like I think following the pullout of the U.S. and the just, you know, the clear victory of the Taliban over the Afghan forces and them literally taking over the government, like they've been running the country since when the U.S. pullout was. That doesn't seem that. I mean, to formally recognize it does seem like a bad move. Like it's, you know, everybody's sort of holding out to try and pretend like, yeah, we're not going to acknowledge you, like you're not really the leader. We know who's really it's not you guys, but like they really are. You know, they can pretend all they want. So like I'm not too mad about this, but like the symbology of it, the symbolism of it is bad. Earlier this month, the European Commission confirmed that it had invited Taliban officials to Brussels, although a spokesperson said that the invitation, quote, does not by any means constitute a recognition. Yeah, I would think you'd have to have some sort. I mean, look, you got to have some line of communication between you and the governments of basically every country around the world, especially when you're a main European commission or you're the US or you're the Russia or something, right? And so does not by any means constitute a recognition. It kind of is a recognition, right? There, you wouldn't be inviting Taliban officials to Brussels for this European Commission meeting or whatever if they weren't the de facto like government leaders of Afghanistan right now and have been for a couple of years now. So seems kind of like a silly, meaningless statement that they would make. I don't know how anybody could believe this. I think it very much is a recognition. I don't know how you could really see it as anything else. But yeah, I just have a feeling that this has some sort of connection between Russia's struggling war effort in Ukraine, bad recruitment numbers. They've been digging themselves further and further into debt. I'm interested to see if there's any more that comes from this. If maybe, you know, Afghanistan starts shipping drone production over to Russia, or they have some sort of military agreement where maybe like Russia provides them oil and then Afghanistan provides them troops, sort of like what they do with North Korea. Like I know Russia helps provides various kinds of support to North Korea, like oil and things like that. And North Korean fighters have famously, or not famously, but have recently been spotted fighting on Russia's side in Ukraine. And so I wonder if they're kind of developing a similar type of thing with Afghanistan and the Taliban right now. I would imagine it's much more precarious because, there's much more of a strong classical relationship between Russia and North Korea. It's very clear that the relationship historically between Afghanistan, the Taliban, and Russia is much more precarious. And so I would imagine the footing that this sort of thing is on is much looser, but who knows? They're probably just throwing everything at the wall right now. I mean, I know Russia internally has been getting drone bombed, has been getting factories and production facilities and even various civilian places, which is probably not good. But Ukraine has been successfully launching various kinds of attacks on Russian soil, which was like unheard of, which would have been practically impossible for the first couple of years of the war. But now the war is starting to come home, and as far as I understand, the citizenry of Russia are becoming much more disillusioned with the war. Millions have died. The country's more and more in debt. The economic conditions of the country aren't any better. Um, I wonder if they're just throwing everything at the wall now, and they're starting to see the writing on the wall that this isn't going to turn out the way that they hoped. I mean, it should have been pretty clear a month or a couple months or a year or two into this conflict, into the war, that it wasn't going to turn out the way they wanted it to. But I mean, because remember, Russia thought that they were going to steamroll over Kiev in like a week. So yeah, we'll see where this ends up.